After watching NCIS's treasure hunt, there's a character from McGee's life I want to return the first clue didn't look like much. A scrap of weathered paper tucked inside a hollowed out law book, its edges singed as though it had survived a fire long before it ever found its way to Timothy McGee's desk. He turned it over in his hands, brow furrowed, that familiar spark lighting behind his eyes, the one his team had come to recognize as the beginning of something complicated, something impossible, something he absolutely wouldn't let go. Treasure hunt. Torres leaned over his shoulder, unimpressed. What are we, 12? McGee didn't answer right away. His fingers traced the faded ink, a cipher hidden beneath what looked like meaningless scribbles. His lips twitched, almost smiling. No, he said quietly. Not a treasure hunt. A message. And just like that, he was in. The case itself was already strange. An antiquities dealer found dead in his Georgetown townhouse, surrounded by maps, coded journals, and artifacts that didn't quite belong together. But it wasn't the murder that had pulled McGee in so deeply. It was the pattern. The clues weren't random. They were personal. And somewhere between the third cipher and the hidden compartment in an old naval chest, McGee realized something that made his stomach drop. He had seen this before. Not the clues exactly, but the style, the rhythm, the way each puzzle seemed to anticipate the solver's next move. It was like a conversation, one he hadn't had in years, but somehow still remembered. Tim. Knight's voice broke through his thoughts. You look like you just saw a ghost. Not a ghost, McGee said, though he wasn't entirely sure he believed that. A ghostwriter. He didn't explain further, not yet, because to say the name out loud would make it real. And if he was wrong, it would just sound ridiculous. But if he was right, then someone from his past had just stepped back into his life. The next clue led them to an old library archive, the kind that smelled like dust and secrets. As the team spread out, McGee lingered near the entrance, his gaze scanning the room like he expected someone to be watching. And then he saw it. A small symbol carved into the underside of a wooden table, so subtle no one else would have noticed. A spiral intersected by a line. His breath caught. That symbol wasn't part of the case. It was part of him. Or rather, part of someone who used to be. Abby. He whispered under his breath, the name slipping out before he could stop it. Memories flooded back, late nights in the lab, music blasting, caffeine-fueled brainstorming sessions that blurred the line between work and play. Abby Ciuto had always seen the world differently, finding patterns where others saw chaos, turning the impossible into something almost magical. And she loved puzzles. Not just solving them, creating them. McGee? Parker's voice echoed from across the room. You got something? He hesitated. For a moment, he considered brushing it off, keeping the connection to himself. But this wasn't just about him. If Abby was somehow involved, if she was out there leaving clues, I think I know who's behind this, he said finally. The idea seemed absurd at first. She left, Torres pointed out bluntly. Years ago. People don't just come back and start playing scavenger hunt with murder cases. She might, McGee said, more firmly than he expected. Knight tilted her head. You really think this is her? I don't know, he admitted, but it feels like her. The clues, the way they're structured, it's not just about solving them. It's about enjoying them. About making the journey matter as much as the answer. Palmer, standing quietly near the edge of the room, spoke up. That does sound like Abby. McGee met his eyes, grateful for the support. She used to say that puzzles were a way of leaving pieces of yourself behind. Little fragments that only the right person could put together. And you think you're the right person? Torres asked. McGee didn't answer right away, because the truth was, he didn't know. But he wanted to be. The deeper they went, the more certain he became. Each clue wasn't just leading them closer to the killer, it was leading him somewhere. Back through memories he hadn't realized he missed so much. Back to a version of himself that had been lighter, more curious, less burdened by everything he'd seen since. And always, just beneath the surface, was Abby. Her voice in his head, her laughter in the rhythm of the puzzles, her unmistakable touch in the way each answer revealed something unexpected. Until finally, the last clue brought him to a place he hadn't been in years. The old forensic lab. It had been renovated since Abby's time, modernized and streamlined. But as McGee stepped inside, he could still feel it, the echo of who she had been there. And on the central table, waiting for him, was a single envelope, his name written across the front. Not typed, handwritten. His hands shook slightly as he opened it. Inside was a letter. Hey, McGee. He exhaled sharply, a laugh catching in his throat. It was her. If you're reading this, it means you followed the trail. I knew you would. You always did love a good mystery, even if you pretended you didn't. His vision blurred for a moment, emotion hitting him harder than he expected. This isn't about the case. Not really. I mean, yes, catch the bad guy, save the day, all that good NCIS stuff. But this was for you. He swallowed, reading on. I wanted to remind you who you are. Not just the agent, not just the guy who carries the weight of the world on his shoulders, but the one who sees the patterns, who gets excited about the little things, who never stops being curious. McGee leaned against the table, steadying himself. I can't just walk back into your life, not like before. But I can leave you a puzzle. And maybe that's enough. At the bottom of the page was that same spiral symbol. And beneath it, one final line. Monsieur McGee. The case wrapped up cleanly after that. The killer was caught, the artifacts recovered, the mystery solved. But for McGee, it wasn't the ending that mattered. It was the beginning. Because for the first time in a long time, he felt something he hadn't realized he'd lost. Connection. Hope. And maybe, just maybe, the possibility that some people never really leave. As he sat at his desk later that night, he turned the letter over in his hands, a small smile forming. Hey, Abby, he murmured softly. And somewhere out there, he liked to think she heard him. Because after watching the treasure hunt unfold, one thing was clear: some characters don't just deserve to return. They already have, in the most unexpected ways. McGee didn't tell anyone he kept the letter in his drawer. Not Parker. Not Knight. Not even Palmer, who would have understood better than most. It felt too personal, too fragile, like something that might disappear if exposed to too much light. But he thought about it constantly. About her. About the way the puzzle had unfolded like a conversation they'd never finished. And, most of all, about that last line. I can't just walk back into your life, not like before. That wasn't a goodbye. It was a boundary, which meant there was still a door. 3 nights later, McGee sat alone in his apartment, the glow of his laptop illuminating the room. The letter lay beside him unfolded, its edges already soft from being handled too many times. He had read it enough to memorize every word, which is why it took him a full minute to notice what he'd missed. No way, he whispered. It wasn't in the writing itself, it was in the spacing. The way certain letters sat just slightly off alignment. Abby had always been meticulous, even when she pretended not to be. If something looked uneven, it was because she wanted it that way. McGee grabbed a notebook and started jotting down the irregular letters. A pattern emerged almost instantly. Coordinates. His heart started racing. Abby, what did you do? The next morning, he didn't wait for permission. Personal errand, he told Parker, already halfway out the bullpen. Parker raised an eyebrow. That sounds suspiciously like something I should be concerned about. It's not a case, McGee said, pausing just long enough to meet his gaze. But it might matter. Something in his tone must have landed, because Parker nodded. Take the time. Just don't get yourself into trouble. McGee offered a faint smile. No promises. Torres smirked from his desk. That's definitely trouble. The coordinates led him just outside the city, to a quiet stretch of land that bordered the water. It wasn't a place anyone would stumble upon accidentally, which made it exactly the kind of place Abby would choose. As he stepped out of his car, the breeze carried the scent of salt and something faintly metallic. The sky stretched wide and open above him, clouds drifting lazily as if time moved slower here. He checked the coordinates again. This was it. But there was nothing. No marker. No obvious clue. Just sand, grass, and the distant sound of waves. McGee exhaled, hands on his hips. Okay, think like Abby. He closed his eyes for a moment, letting the environment settle around him. What would she do? Not hide something in plain sight. Not make it too easy. But not impossible either. Fun. It had to be fun. His eyes snapped open. Of course! He started walking, not toward the water, but along the edge of the grass, scanning the ground. It didn't take long before he spotted it. A small, brightly colored object half buried in the dirt. A dog tag. Except it wasn't military issued. It was custom made, painted in neon colors with tiny skull decals. McGee laughed under his breath. You're kidding me. He picked it up, turning it over. Etched into the back was a single word: dig. 10 minutes later, he was kneeling in the dirt, hands covered in soil, feeling slightly ridiculous and completely certain he was exactly where he needed to be. Please don't let this be a prank, he muttered as his fingers hit something solid. A box. Small. Metal. Locked. He pulled it free, brushing off the dirt. There was no keyhole, just a keypad. Of course. All right, McGee said, wiping his hands on his jeans. What's the code? He stared at the keypad, mind racing. Abby wouldn't make it random. It would be something meaningful, something they shared. His birthday? Too obvious. Her birthday? Maybe, but no, she'd think that was cliche. Then it hit him. CAF POW. He grinned, entering the numbers that corresponded to the letters. The lock clicked open. Still predictable, he said softly, though his chest tightened with something deeper than amusement. Inside the box was another envelope. And something else. A small USB drive. McGee hesitated before opening the letter, almost afraid of what it might say. But curiosity won. Hey again, McGee. He let out a shaky breath. If you found this, it means you're still you. And that makes me really, really happy. His grip tightened slightly on the paper. I know I said I couldn't just come back. And I meant it. Life's different now. Complicated in ways that don't fit neatly into the world we used to share. He swallowed. But that doesn't mean I'm gone. McGee glanced at the USB drive, heart pounding. Consider this a compromise. A way for me to be part of your world again, just from a distance. He closed his eyes briefly. Plug it in when you're ready. He didn't wait. Back in his car, hands still slightly dirty, McGee inserted the USB drive into his laptop. For a moment, nothing happened. Then a video file appeared. He clicked it. The screen flickered. And then, hey McGee. He froze. Abby's face filled the screen, exactly as he remembered, bright, animated, alive with energy that seemed to leap through the pixels. Okay, first of all, if you're seeing this, you're officially the coolest puzzle solver I know. Which, duh, I already knew, but still. Confirmation is nice. McGee let out a breath that was half laugh, half something else entirely. You probably have a million questions, she continued. Like where I am, what I'm doing, why I turned a murder case into a scavenger hunt. He leaned closer to the screen, as if that might somehow bring her nearer. Short answers? Safe. Good. And because I needed to remind you that the world is still a little weird and wonderful, even when it gets dark. Her expression softened. And because I miss you. The words hit harder spoken than written. McGee's throat tightened. I can't come back to NCIS, Abby said gently. Not right now. Maybe not ever in the way it used to be. But that doesn't mean we can't reconnect. She gestured toward the screen. Think of this as version 2.0. Less lab explosions, more encrypted messages. He smiled despite himself. Check the drive, she added. I left you some things. Projects. Puzzles. Maybe even a few surprises for the team, because let's be honest, Torres could use a challenge. McGee laughed softly. And hey, Abby said, leaning closer, her voice dropping just slightly. Don't carry everything by yourself, okay? You don't have to. The screen paused for a split second, like she almost said more. Then she smiled. Talk soon, McGee. The video ended. For a long time, McGee just sat there, staring at the blank screen. Then he looked down at the USB drive still plugged into his laptop, at the letter in his hand, at the dirt still under his fingernails. And he smiled. Because after everything, the distance, the years, the change, one thing was clear. She hadn't just come back as a memory. She'd found a new way to be part of his life. And this time, the puzzle wasn't about finding her. It was about keeping her. McGee didn't bring the USB drive into the bullpen right away. For the first time since Abby had reappeared, first as a whisper in a puzzle, then as a voice on a screen, he hesitated. Not because he didn't trust her, because he did. Completely. But NCIS wasn't just his world anymore. It was rules, protocol, layers of oversight that Abby had never quite fit into even when she'd been its beating, caffeinated heart. Whatever she had sent him, it wasn't just personal. It was intentional. And intention always came with consequences. Still, by the next morning, curiosity won. You've been staring at that thing for 10 minutes, Torres said, dropping into the chair across from him. Either it's classified or it's embarrassing. McGee didn't look up. It's neither. Then what is it? McGee finally met his eyes, something unreadable in his expression. It's complicated. Torres grinned. Now I'm definitely interested. Knight leaned over the divider. If this turns into another one of your I found a weird clue and didn't tell anyone situations, I'm filing a complaint. It's not a case, McGee said, though even as he said it, he wasn't entirely sure that was still true. Parker's voice cut in from behind them. If it involves mystery, secrecy, and McGee looking like he hasn't slept, I'm calling it a case. McGee exhaled. There it was. No turning back now. It's from Abby. Silence. Torres blinked. As in Abby? Knight's expression softened immediately. She reached out. Palmer, who had been quietly organizing files nearby, froze. Is she okay? McGee nodded. She's okay. She's good, actually. Parker folded his arms. And she sent you something. McGee held up the USB drive. And you haven't plugged it into a government system, Parker added carefully. No. Good, Parker said. Because if this turns out to be some kind of cyber nightmare, I'd prefer not to explain how we got hacked by one of our own legends. Torres smirked. That would actually be kind of impressive. McGee couldn't help a small smile. It's not a hack. It's Abby. Knight tilted her head. Which might be worse. They didn't use the main system. Instead, McGee set up an isolated laptop in one of the quieter corners of the office. Old hardware, no network connection safe. Or as safe as anything involving Abby Ciuto could be. Moment of truth, Torres said, leaning against the desk. McGee inserted the USB drive. The same folders appeared, neatly organized, labeled in Abby's unmistakable style. Bright names, a few emojis, and just enough chaos to feel like her. But there was something new. A file that hadn't been there before. Was that there yesterday? Knight asked. McGee shook his head slowly. No, Torres raised an eyebrow. Okay, that's creepy. It's Abby, McGee said again, though this time it sounded more like a reminder to himself. He clicked the file. The screen flickered. Then text appeared. Hey, McGee. He froze. That's not a video, Palmer said quietly. No, McGee replied. It's not. The text continued, appearing line by line as if being typed in real time. So, this is new. Torres straightened. Okay, I officially don't like this. Knight leaned in closer. Is she connected right now? McGee's pulse quickened. There's no network. She shouldn't be able to, the text continued. Before you panic, relax. It's not magic. It's just really, really good programming. A beat. And maybe a little bit of Abby magic. Despite everything, McGee smiled. She built a timed response system, he murmured. Something that reacts based on user behavior. Torres blinked. In English? She knew I'd open this here, McGee said, eyes scanning the screen. She anticipated the environment, the delay, the way I'd approach it. Knight shook her head, impressed. That's next level. The text shifted. Okay, serious part now. McGee's smile faded. I didn't just send you puzzles for fun. Well, mostly for fun. But also because I found something. Parker stepped closer. Now it's a case. McGee didn't argue. While I was working on some independent research, don't ask, it's very Abby, I came across a pattern. Financial transactions, encrypted communications, movement of artifacts that shouldn't even exist on paper. Torres muttered, here we go. At first, I thought it was just another black market network. But it's not. It's bigger. older, and way more careful. The room felt smaller somehow. I couldn't access everything from where I am. Too many walls, too many risks. A pause. But you can. McGee's jaw tightened. Of course, he whispered. I needed to know if you were still the guy who could follow the trail, who could see what others miss. Knight glanced at him. Guess you passed. The text continued. Now I need you to decide if you want to keep going. A new file icon appeared on the screen. Untitled. Blinking. Because once you open that, it's not a game anymore. Silence settled over the group. Torres crossed his arms. Yeah, I'm gonna go ahead and say we're opening that. Parker didn't respond immediately. His gaze stayed fixed on the screen, weighing the situation like he always did, carefully, deliberately. Finally, he looked at McGee. This started with you, he said. It's your call. McGee stared at the blinking file, at Abby's words, at the invisible thread that had somehow pulled her back into his life, not just as a memory, not just as a friend, but as the beginning of something bigger, something dangerous. He thought about the treasure hunt, about the way it had made him feel alive, curious, connected, about Abby, wherever she was, trusting him enough to send this. And then he thought about what she'd said. You don't have to carry everything by yourself. McGee reached for the keyboard. Then I won't, he said quietly. He glanced at his team. At Parker, at Knight, at Torres, at Palmer. And for the first time since this all began, he didn't feel like he was chasing something alone. He double-clicked the file. The screen went dark. Then a map appeared. Dozens of marked across it. Lines connecting them. A network. Parker exhaled slowly. That's not small. Torres leaned in. That's global. Knight's voice dropped. What are we looking at? McGee didn't answer right away, because at the center of the map was a symbol, a spiral intersected by a line. Abby's mark. But this time, it wasn't a signature. It was a warning. And suddenly, the treasure hunt didn't feel like a game anymore. It felt like the first move in something far more dangerous. And Abby hadn't just come back. She had pulled them into it.